Sorry, but we have already left. While I was using the restroom at the rest area, I got a call from Luke. I wondered what he wanted at such a time. Answering the call, I heard Luke and his in-laws laughing boisterously. What's going on? When I asked, he said something unbelievable. We're going to enjoy ourselves with the family. You can head back home and clean or something. I had been looking forward to this trip, as it was after a long time. Even though I had reservations about traveling with his family, I was excited about staying in a luxury inn. To think he'd leave me alone at a rest area like this. Inside the restroom stall, I trembled, feeling deeply betrayed. Even with my anger, I lightly replied, okay. Unforgivable. Today was not only our wedding anniversary but also my birthday, and we came on this trip. I'll make him regret this. My name is Lucy Mitchell. I'm a 33-year-old housewife. I don't have any children and live with my husband, Luke. We married exactly 1 year ago, on my birthday. Luke has a romantic nature and always cherished our anniversaries and birthdays. From what I heard, during his days living at home, he would be treated to luxurious dinners and trips abroad or cruises for his birthday. Perhaps those memories from his childhood lingered, as he always wanted to celebrate special days in grand style after we got married. As you may have guessed from the birthday story, Luke's family is wealthy. His father is the CEO of Mitchell Securities. His mother, my mother-in-law, has fully embraced the wealthy lifestyle. Luke, being the heir to the company, occasionally showed signs of being a bit too pampered. However, I knew he cherished me, which is why I married him. We initially met at a matchmaking agency. Men from wealthy backgrounds, like Luke, were popular there. I almost gave up when I approached him, but luckily, I seemed to be his type, and that led to our marriage. It might have helped that I wasn't seeking a partner solely for their wealth. Having achieved my childhood dream of marriage, I was ecstatic. But I was unaware. Unaware that after getting married, my life would take a turn for the worse. A year ago, Luke and I began our marital life in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Luke wanted a bigger house, but I disagreed. Regardless of his family's wealth, a large apartment seemed unnecessary for just the two of us. I suggested we live in a place that matched our means for now since we could always move if we rented. However, being in the city, our rent was expensive at $1,200, and as a housewife, I felt guilty. $1,200 is nothing to worry about. My dad will sort it out. Although he was the heir, working at Mitchell Securities, I thought there would be some considerations with other employees. I wondered, is this really okay? Yet, the next month, his salary increased by $500. Your dad's amazing, being able to raise your salary just like that. Luke replied, it was time for a raise anyway. I won't let you face any hardships, Lucy. Count on me. Even though Luke relied on his father's power for money, I felt grateful for the raise and didn't challenge him. By the way, I'm having dinner with my parents today. Wait, like a business dinner? No, just a family dinner. I think I'll be back by 10. Take care. Unexpectedly, Luke, even after marrying me, casually mentioned dining with his parents on a regular evening. Caught off guard and in a daze, I watched him say, I should get going, and leave the house. Dinner? On a weekday? Well, today is TGIF after all. I hadn't heard about Luke planning to dine with his in-laws. Usually, as his wife, I'd be invited too. Not that I want a free meal, but it's essential to build a good relationship with one's in-laws. I couldn't comprehend Luke's actions and began feeling uneasy about our newlywed life. From then on, there was always something off about our marriage. After that dinner incident, Luke frequently went to his parents' house for reasons like it's my cousin's birthday, or can't make it today. Moms asked me to come over. Being a first-time bride, I just nodded, thinking this is normal. But when I had dinner with a friend one day Luke was absent, she gave me a surprised look. What? He goes home that often? And leaving you behind for a cousin's birthday? That's crazy. She had been married for 5 years and had more experience than me in married life. Realizing that her reaction was the common sentiment, I felt embarrassed. You're right, it's weird. But according to Luke, it's normal. Seriously? Don't take this the wrong way, but hasn't he really grown up yet? Maybe. Upon reflection, her comment struck a chord. It's unusual for a 35-year-old, even if he's set to take over his dad's business, to prioritize family affairs after getting married. I regretted not recognizing Luke's true nature before marrying him. Returning home after dinner with my friend, I felt down. I'm home. Lucy, where have you been? Isn't it normal for a wife to cook dinner and wait for her husband? Mrs. Mitchell. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was in the living room. Luke was apparently out. Perhaps at a convenience store. Why are you here? Weren't you and Luke supposed to dine out tonight? That got cancelled due to some issue at the restaurant. I thought Luke had messaged you just a bit ago, didn't you check? She pointed it out, and I looked at my phone. Indeed, 10 minutes ago, Luke had messaged that he'd be home early. But that was just about when I got off the train. There's no way I could have gotten home and started dinner in such a short time. Yes, he did message, but I saw it just now. What the heck? This is the problem with kids from single-parent households. You can tell they weren't raised right. My mother-in-law's words stabbed me in the heart. Indeed, I was raised in a single mother's home. After my mom gave birth to me, my father passed away due to an illness. Despite that, my mother did her best to raise me lovingly. I wished she wouldn't say things that belittled my mother's hard work. It has nothing to do with being raised by a single parent. I just hadn't seen the message yet. I retorted, clearly irritated, but she brushed off my comment and changed the subject. Well, anyway, I've always noticed this, but your house is quite small. I think it's average. It's suitable for just the two of us. You can't be serious. I feel sorry for Luke living in such a cramped space. My interactions with my mother-in-law continued to stress me out. Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law, perhaps because of their wealth, often seemed condescending. That's why I never got along with them. Realizing further conversation was futile, I silently started preparing dinner. Ignoring me, she went on and turned on the TV. From that day, she started dropping by unexpectedly more often. Even my father-in-law came along a couple of times. Mostly, they'd complain about how dirty the kitchen was or how cramped the house felt. Eventually, they'd sarcastically suggest, we have a bigger house. Why not move in? I absolutely didn't want that. I firmly declined every time. They always visited when Luke wasn't home. So, Luke didn't know about their snide remarks. I once talked to him about it, but his reply was, why not? Why is living together a bad idea? I was dismayed when he too suggested moving in. From then on, I realized there was no point in discussing it with Luke, and I endured on my own. Soon, we'd be celebrating our first wedding anniversary, which also happened to be my birthday. For your birthday this weekend, I'm thinking of celebrating more grandly than last year. After all, it's also our anniversary. Luke, coming home tipsy from work, said as he looked at me. Seeing his flushed face, I couldn't be sure of his sincerity. Knowing his love for celebrations, I felt a hint of excitement. What? Last year, you treated me to a delicious dinner, which was more than enough. That's nothing compared to what I've planned. Let's go on a family trip. A family trip? The term family trip sounded odd for just the two of us. Noticing my confusion, Luke continued. My parents, cousins, uncles, and all will join. We're heading to a luxury resort in Palm Springs. All those people? And why Palm Springs? Got a problem with a family trip, or is it Palm Springs you're not keen on? No, it's not that. Honestly, I couldn't understand why my birthday and our anniversary would involve his family, who had nothing to do with either occasion. I couldn't grasp what Luke was thinking. I've always known he's a bit out of touch with the general populace, but I hadn't expected this level of disparity. While the choice of Palm Springs puzzled me a bit, it wasn't a major issue. Sounds fun, right? Lucy, sometimes you gotta let loose and enjoy. Luke, in his intoxicated state, grabbed my shoulders, and I found myself nodding in agreement. For the next week, I couldn't get the trip out of my mind. At first, I was skeptical about going with his entire family, but as Luke said, it's a rare vacation, and I should make the most of it. During the trip preparations, I noticed my growing excitement, and a genuine smile crept onto my face. I knew my in-laws would probably make snide remarks as usual, but I vowed to ignore them completely. Finally, the awaited Saturday arrived. Luke and I headed to his parents' house, our meeting point for the trip. Well, Lucy, you're late, aren't you? Do you even realize you're the star today? Right in front of the assembled family, my mother-in-law was quick to throw shade. But it seemed she did realize that I was supposed to be the star, so it took the edge off her words a bit. I'm sorry, there was traffic. Excuses won't do. We should leave soon. Otherwise, we'll be late to our luxury resort. All right, let's get going. Despite their grumbling about our tardiness, it was tolerable. After all, they'd been making such remarks throughout the past year. Luke's cousin appeared much younger than him, looking to be in his early 20s. With a sinister look in his eyes, I began to wonder if everyone in this family was mean-spirited. My paranoia was somewhat justified when he made a belittling comment, "This is Luke's wife?" Not what I expected. I diverted my gaze from him. I figured if I reacted, they'd only nitpick more. I decided to show a mature demeanor. I'm so excited! I've been to luxury resorts multiple times, but tonight's place costs $1,000 per person. Hearing the figure, $1,000, I was both shocked and had a sudden thought. No way, could it be? I climbed into my in-laws' car. Once my father-in-law hit the gas, the car swiftly started moving. From here to our Palm Springs destination would take about 2 hours. We decided to take a short break at the next rest stop about an hour into our journey. I'll be right back, heading to the restroom. All right, off you go. My mother-in-law waved, as if shooing away a stray dog. I headed to the rest stop bathroom, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Or was it just my imagination? Taking a deep breath inside the bathroom stall, I felt relieved that the trip had been relatively uneventful so far. I hoped the remainder of our journey would be equally smooth. Just as I was settling into that thought, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Luke's name on the display. Expecting him to ask me to pick something up, I casually answered the call. I'm still in the restroom. Luke, with what sounded like amusement, replied alongside the laughter of my mother-in-law. Sorry, but we've already left. There was a moment of stunned silence on my end. Laughter echoed from their side. What do you mean? When I asked, Luke replied, We're going to have fun with our family. You should just go home and clean. Lucy dear, today's trip is just for the Mitchell family. It's a pity, but you'll have to stay behind. Goodbye. I was told the unbelievable. I had been looking forward to this trip for a long time. Having his family join us was a bit of a concern, but staying at a luxury hotel had me excited. And now they left me alone at the rest area. I was trembling inside the restroom stall, feeling utterly betrayed. Trying to hide my anger, I responded with a light okay. This was unforgivable. Today was our wedding anniversary and my birthday, and they brought me on this trip. I'll make them regret this. After leaving the restroom, I called someone. The person on the other end was shocked and shared some astonishing news. I asked, Really? They responded, Yes. Then, the person on the phone promised to come pick me up. Left alone at the rest area like this was unbearable. Praying for a timely rescue, an hour later, my uncle came to pick me up in his car. I'm so sorry to trouble you like this. It's okay. It's quite an unfortunate situation. Yes. They're headed to a luxury hotel in Palm Springs. That means? My uncle tilted his head in thought, seeming to realize something. I think that's the case, I replied. I'm really sorry, but can you please take me there? I'll take the train back. Got it. The drive there is nice anyway. Uncle gladly accepted my request to go to Palm Springs. About an hour later, we arrived in Palm Springs. Luke and the others came here. In front of us was a luxurious inn with a grand gate. It was a well-known high-end hotel. The only luxury accommodation I knew of that costs $1,000 a night. At the reception, I was told dinner starts at 6 p.m., please follow me. The person who greeted me with a smile was my mother. Lucy, it's been a while. It's been a while, Mom. Dressed in an elegant outfit and smiling gracefully in a manner that could seem somewhat formal to others, it was undeniably my mother. Indeed, this inn has been run by my mother's family for many years, and she currently holds the position of the innkeeper. After becoming a single mother, she began working at this inn. So, to me, this place feels like home. I had called my mother from the rest area, and was surprised to hear that there was a reservation today from the group at Mitchell Securities. I had a suspicion when I heard they were going to a luxury hotel in Palm Springs, but I never imagined they would be coming to our very own inn. Of course, the family doesn't know that this inn is run by my mother. Still, what a terrible story. Lucy, you can't just let this slide. Yeah, I know. That's why I came here. I see. Why don't we get you changed over here? I prepared to greet them at the dinner table. An hour later, at 6 p.m., the in-law family gathered for dinner. I hid in the next room to remain unnoticed. I slightly opened the door to observe the inside. Ah, the spa was amazing. I'd want to come here every day if I could. If it were closer, we could indeed come every day. At the very least, if you become the CEO, we could afford to come here anytime. Really? I'm looking forward to that. I mean, the subordinates handle all the work anyway. I want to become a CEO soon too. Luke and his family, thinking they were among themselves, were making some rather crude remarks. But when my mother appeared from the other side of the door and greeted them, the room went silent. Today, I will be in charge of serving you. Please let me know if you need anything. Seeing my mother bow with perfect grace, there was a tangible tension amongst the family. However, when the food was served, they resumed their inappropriate discussions. For a while, both my mother and I did nothing, simply watching the plates empty before them. It's great that we all could come. We got rid of the bothersome daughter-in-law, and the food is delicious. Perfect. If you say that, she might get angry, you know? It's fine. She's not really one of us. To be frank, she never was. After all, it would be a shame to have a child from a single-parent family in our household. Hearing her mother-in-law's harsh words, my frustration boiled to an almost uncontrollable point. At that very moment, my mother entered the room with a dessert plate loaded with cake and fruit. Today, I've heard it's Ms. Lucy's birthday and also her wedding anniversary with her husband. May I know where Ms. Lucy is seated? In response to my mother's question about where to place the cake, the family looked at each other, confused. Nobody told you that. Excuse me, I'm the innkeeper, and I've clearly heard about it. Did Luke call? What? I didn't tell anyone. There was an awkward silence in the room, and the in-laws exchanged "what do we do now" glances. In the end, the mother-in-law raised her hand. I am Lucy. I was too embarrassed to mention it at this age, but thank you all for the surprise. Given that the only woman in the room was the mother-in-law, her reaction was appropriate. However, my mother gave a faint smile upon seeing her act. Hey, what's so funny? Is it strange to be surprised at my age? No, not at all. I wasn't thinking that. Then what? Just bring the cake already. Yes, but before that, there's something I'd like to share. As the irate mother-in-law barked at her, my mother composed herself. I swallowed hard. Lucy Mitchell is my daughter. What? Everyone present made a dumbfounded expression and raised their voices in shock. Seeing an opportunity, I swiftly opened the door from the adjacent room and stood next to my mother. Welcome. This innkeeper is my mother. It's a pleasure to meet you. Luke exclaimed, Lucy. Why are you here? And what do you mean she's your mother? It means exactly that. This inn belongs to my family. I also intend to take over this place someday. In truth, Luke had never met my mother before. While part of it was due to my mother being busy with the inn, Luke and his parents also insisted on not meeting her face to face. I had received a phone call from Luke for our wedding introduction, but he never met her in person. I showed my mother a picture of Luke and explained who he was. It was an unconventional introduction, but I believed my mother had accepted him then. From your conversations earlier, could you please refrain from mocking and belittling my mother for being a single parent? We just stated the facts. That's right. What's with the sudden drama? What grudge do you have against us? Neither Luke, nor his mother, nor anyone else seemed to realize the extent of the disrespect they had shown me. Exasperated, I let out my anger that had been building up. Grudges? If I have any grudges, it starts with you, Luke. I thought you were a good person when we got married, but it turns out you're a mama's boy. You married me, so you should prioritize me above all else, right? Don't join forces with your parents to mock me. Faced with my undeniable logic, Luke was rendered speechless. My mother just listened quietly to my outburst. And to my in-laws, why do you treat me this way? If you find me such a nuisance, I can leave the Mitchell family right now. What? You'll become a lonely, poor single woman. Yeah, are you sure about being alone? Both the mother-in-law and Luke sneered, looking back and forth between my mother and me. I stared back fiercely. It's okay. Actually, I'm pregnant. So, I won't be lonely. And if I inherit this inn, I won't have any financial worries. The truth is, I found out I was pregnant last week. And I hadn't told Luke yet. Only my mother knew, which is why she wasn't surprised. A child? What are you talking about? I haven't heard about this. Wait, Lucy, if that's the case, it changes things. You should have told us sooner. Upon learning I was pregnant, the family immediately changed their tune. I couldn't stand their fickle and unreasonable behavior any longer and shouted again. No. My decision is final. Let's proceed with the divorce through lawyers. I will live happily with my child and my mother. Saying this, I opened the door to the hall they were in and left. The door slammed shut with a sharp noise. I'm done with this. My child will be happier without that family. Whether trying to change my mind or not, I received over 30 calls a day from Luke and his parents. Eventually, I blocked all their numbers. A few days later, I received a letter from Luke informing me of our official divorce. The letter expressed his regret and pleaded for me to return, but I ignored it and tore it up. I thought he might neglect our child just like he prioritized his parents over me. And I absolutely didn't want that. Being alone and lonely would be your fate, not mine. I thought he should enjoy his bachelor life. Currently, I am nurturing my child in my womb and discussing future plans with my mother. Once the child is born and grows a bit, I plan to send them to daycare and join the inn's business. The path to becoming the next innkeeper is long, but to raise my child properly, I'm determined to work hard. My husband, Tom, works odd jobs and earns a meager salary. We're living off my earnings. Despite this, he pushes all household chores on me and struts around like he's in charge. One day, Tom said, "From next week, we're gonna live with my sister and her husband. Clear out a room for them." What? My brother-in-law left the company and they have to move out of the company housing. So I invited them to stay with us. I was speechless. Making decisions without consulting me? Unacceptable. Well then, please handle the monthly mortgage of $2,800. Why? I want a divorce. What? Tom burst out laughing. What are you talking about? There's no way I can afford that on my $800 monthly salary. You'll have to cover it. My sister is thrilled about living with Jason. I'm also looking forward to living with her again. I felt a surge of intense anger at Tom for making decisions on his own. If you're so fond of your sister, you should just live with her alone. But I'm definitely not on board. Just you wait, I won't let you have your way anymore. My name is Lucy, 45 years old. 10 years ago, right before our wedding, my engagement was broken off. I was at an all-time low when my coworker, Tom, comforted me. That's how our relationship started. The following year, we got married and soon after had our eldest son, Jason. I love my job, so I returned to work full-time after taking a year for maternity leave. With both my husband and me working full-time, we can easily save for Jason's tuition fees and secure our retirement. But then Tom had to take responsibility for a mistake at work and was transferred from the main office of a big corporation to one of its subsidiaries. Unhappy with this, Tom quit his job and began working part-time. His income dropped to a quarter of what it was, but I thought I'd just work more to compensate. However, there's something that worries me more than Tom's salary. It's his sister, Vanessa. Tom's family owned a general store in the local business district, and since they were busy, Vanessa took care of Tom from a young age. She was, in a sense, like a parent to him. She still dotes on Tom more than their own parents and frequently calls him. They exchange messages and she even drops by our house unannounced every 2 weeks. It's really bothersome, but I can't just turn her away. I'm stuck in a tough spot. What's more concerning is that recently, Vanessa seems more interested in our son, Jason, than in Tom. Once, I was forcibly shown the family album that Vanessa said she treasured, and I was shocked to see that Jason looks just like a young Tom. Vanessa, although 53, still looks good. If she toned down her makeup, she'd probably look a lot like Tom. Seeing Tom grow a beard and age made Vanessa a bit disappointed. But now that her nephew is growing to look more and more like a young Tom, she seems overjoyed. So, whenever she visits unexpectedly and Jason isn't around, she becomes noticeably upset.
Jason's still at soccer practice? Isn't it too late for a 9-year-old?
She'd say, lounging on the sofa in her lace and frilly dress, pouting with her pink lips. He started because his friends invited him. Besides, it's only 6 p.m.
Third graders should be in bed by 8 p.m.
No way, he has homework too. Times have changed, kids nowadays are busier. Vanessa apparently had difficulty conceiving and, after trying for several years, she gave up. So, her unfamiliarity with modern parenting is understandable, but she still tends to give unsolicited advice. She usually comes over during dinner time. I've heard her husband is on a work assignment in another city, so she likely times her visits to eat with us. And she always has something to say about the food.
Really? You're pairing pork chop with clam stew? I'd go with Caesar salad.
Vanessa is good at cooking, so she must be right.
Well, this is good too, but it could use a bit more salt. I'll eat it since it's here.
On another day.
This chicken breast is dry, hard to eat.
Oh, is it? Right? It's always like this. Her cooking is on par with a kindergartner. I fumed silently as Tom laughed. I didn't want to hear it from someone who didn't even know how to hold a cooking knife.
If it were me, I'd moisten it with water or wine before cooking.
I did that.
Then, it must be Lucy's poor skills. There's no helping it.
Both Vanessa and Tom burst into laughter. Vanessa always cleans her plate but never misses a chance to add a snide comment.
Lucy, since Tom's taking care of you, you ought to consider a proper nutritional balance for him, right Tom?
Well, yeah. Next to Tom, who awkwardly avoids her gaze, I smirk silently to myself. It seems my sister-in-law doesn't realize that I'm the one supporting Tom. Then, when Jason returns, all hell breaks loose.
Jason! It's been 2 weeks. Let Auntie get a good look at you. Oh my, you look exactly like your dad when he was young. A future heartthrob for sure. Why not consider being a pop star?
Nah, I'm gonna be a soccer player.
Are you sure? What a waste. Have you grown taller? Your skin's so smooth, long eyelashes, and silky hair. Lucky you.
As Vanessa touches all over his face and hair, Jason forces a smile, but he can't exactly shove his aunt away, so he looks at me for help. Doing the dishes, I rush over, drying my hands, and pull Vanessa away from Jason. Vanessa, please stop. Jason's clearly uncomfortable.
It's just a bit of touching. It's not a big deal, right, Tom?
Yeah. Vanessa doesn't have kids, so let her touch him. Tom, playing with his phone on the couch, makes the careless remark. It irritates me. Jason isn't a toy. I might find him adorable, but I don't go all touchy-feely on him. This is different. If he doesn't like it, you should respect that.
Jason, you don't really mind, do you? With that kind of questioning, how's he supposed to say no? Vanessa, if you don't stop this behavior, I won't let you see him anymore. Oh, don't be so stingy. Fine, from now on, I'll just look from a distance.
Vanessa reluctantly agreed, so I felt relieved. However, that's not the only issue in our household. The other day, I suddenly had to work overtime, so I called Tom during my lunch break. Sorry, can you and Jason eat the leftovers in the fridge? Oh, sure. Got it. However, as soon as I came home, Jason ran up to me. I'm hungry. Wait, you haven't eaten yet? Tom, getting up from the couch, grumbled. There's nothing. If it's not freshly cooked dishes, I ain't eating. He snootily remarked, looking at the beef and potatoes I had laid out on the table. If it's just yesterday's leftovers, I don't want it. I'm gonna get a burger. Then, with a scowl, he said to me, if you can't even prepare a meal, don't work late. Well, maybe you should cook every once in a while, Tom. I snapped back, and he replied disdainfully. Excuse me? Isn't housework a woman's job? Even if your cooking sucks. Remember, I took pity on your unattractive self. Thought you'd never find a husband. He smirked wickedly.
You can never thank me enough, can you?
I was infuriated, but with Jason right in front of me, I bit my tongue. It's always like this. Whenever we fight, he brings up how he rescued me, making it sound like he did me some huge favor. Sure, back then, it was Tom who saved me when I was at my lowest. But now, he's just a low-wage part-timer relying on my salary, and he dumps all the housework on me while acting high and mighty. Will I always be belittled like this? That night, as I gazed at Jason's innocent sleeping face, I pondered. A household where the father ridicules the mother can't be good for a child. Should I get a divorce? But Jason, given my busy work schedule, is attached to Tom. It feels like I'd be taking away his father, and it makes me hesitate. One restless day, after seeing Jason fall asleep, Tom approached me. From next week, we're gonna live with my sister and her husband. Clear out a room for them. What? I was taken aback. Not what, clean it up properly. I haven't heard anything about this. That's why I'm telling you now. Tom said, sounding annoyed. My brother-in-law left the company and they have to move out of the company housing. So, I invited them here. Told them they can stay as long as they want. I was dumbfounded. What is he thinking? Making decisions without even asking me. I put on a smile and turned it toward Tom. Well then, please handle the monthly mortgage of $2,800. Why? I want a divorce.
What?
After a brief pause, Tom burst out laughing.
What are you talking about? There's no way I can afford that on my $800 monthly salary. You'll have to cover it.
As if it were a given. Tom continued with a smirk.
My sister is thrilled about living with Jason. She says now they can finally become a real family. I'm also looking forward to living with her again.
Oh, really? I felt a surge of intense anger at Tom for making decisions on his own. All right, I get it. If you're so fond of your sister, you should just live with her alone. But I'm definitely not on board. Just you wait, I won't let you have your way anymore. Starting the next day, I took some paid time off and began packing little by little while Tom was at work. I called my parents to see if I could temporarily stay with them. They were even more angry than I was, after hearing about Vanessa's attachment to Jason.
Does she think she can treat our precious grandchild like some kind of pet? What a creep!
We can't leave you and Jason in a place like that. Come back home.
Thank you. I'm sorry for this sudden change.
When I told Jason we were getting divorced, he asked me with uncertainty. Can I come with you, Mom?
Of course, honey. We'll be staying at your grandparents' for a while. Yay! I love Grandma and Grandpa.
I hesitated for a moment before asking.
You know, you might not see your dad as often. Is that okay?
It's fine. Dad hardly ever plays with me. He just gives short answers to my stories about school, so it's boring.
Oh, really? Jason made a face, clearly annoyed. Even when he took me to the park when I was little, he'd just sit on the bench and play on his phone.
I wanted to play catch, but he'd always say he's too busy and that I should play by myself. I was always jealous of the other kids with their dads.
I had no idea.
Tom, who always left the household chores to me, would still take a young Jason to the park on his days off. During that time, I was able to do household chores and shopping, which was a huge help. Since Tom always brought toys to play with outside, I assumed they were having fun time together as guys. If Tom wasn't even fulfilling his duties as a father, there was no reason for us to stay together. Fortunately, my parents' house was in the neighboring town, so Jason didn't have to switch schools, and he could continue his soccer lessons, which was a relief. Once I moved back to my parents, I transferred the house's ownership to Tom, changed my address, and started to file for divorce. It's not just about separating, but we also need to split our shared property in half. We need to figure out the worth of our marital property and then split them. We also need to discuss and decide on how much child support for Jason. A friend of my father's mentioned he knew an attorney who's good with divorces, so I've scheduled a meeting to consult with this person over the weekend. One day, after some time had passed since I moved out, I checked my cell phone on my way home from work and my eyes widened. In just 3 hours, an insane number of calls and messages had come in. The voicemail had Tom's desperate voice on it.
Lucy. I got a bill for the house mortgage asking for $2,800. Didn't I say I can't pay?
I sighed and drove back home. Though he sounded so close to tears over the phone, when we met face to face, Tom was as arrogant as ever.
Hey, why am I getting the mortgage bill? This house is under your name, ain't it?
He raised his voice without even waiting for me to sit on the couch. Yes, it's under my name. But you decided on your own to let your sister and her husband live here, remember?
Of course, it's my house too. What's wrong with living with family? We should help each other out when in need, right?
Then, starting next week, I'll invite my parents over. They're getting old, and I'm worried. That's fine, right? Tom's eyes widened.
What are you talking about? No way am I gonna approve of living with your folks.
See, Tom? You react just the same way I do. At my remark, Tom's face turned sour, as if he'd bitten into a lemon.
But wanting a divorce over something like this is just selfish. We have a young kid, Jason. You're gonna take his dad away from him?
I've put up with a lot until now, and I've thought about Jason too. But I just can't stand your arrogance anymore. I said in a restrained tone. Anyway, I've moved out. It's only natural to transfer the house to your name, isn't it?
You left without my permission, and you think that's okay? I'm willing to let it slide for now, but hurry up and bring Jason back.
Without your permission? It's laughable coming from his mouth. Then, as I fell silent, Tom said in a lowered tone. You're not getting something, are you?
What?
No one told you to leave. Suddenly his tone was gentle, and he put on a fawning smile. Vanessa told me she had no intention of kicking you out. So, come back, do the chores as you've always done, and contribute to the household. Just because there are 2 more of us now doesn't mean things have to change. We have spare rooms after all.
I agree about the spare rooms.
Right? We need to make use of them. But a $2,800 mortgage is just too much. Tom shrugged, looking exasperated. I replied, half in disbelief.
You're the one who took out such a high mortgage, Tom. What? My fault? I said I'd be fine with any prefab house if it had a yard. You were the one who listened to the sales staff and opted for all those luxuries. Tom frowned, and I retorted sharply. You said you wanted a house from a well-known builder, a 7-bedroom place, within a 5-minute walk to the station. You wanted a rooftop, a spacious yard, and a basement. You even wanted imported wall and floor materials. If you stack up such extravagant requirements, of course, it's gonna be expensive. What can I do? If I want to brag to my colleagues and subordinates, it has to be at least this good. Tom tilted his chin up, saying it as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I was a manager at a top-tier company, that's why we got that loan. Yeah, and in less than 2 years, you were transferred to a subsidiary and became a part-timer. Since your salary dropped significantly, I, who had been working part-time, took a test to become a full-time employee and ended up paying the mortgage on the house in your name. It's natural for families to help each other out. Tom said arrogantly, without showing a shred of gratitude towards me. That's why it's only natural to let Vanessa and her husband live in our house. And yet you refuse. You really are cold-hearted. I was ticked off and raised my voice. So, when is my brother-in-law gonna find a new job? Vanessa is gonna work too, right? How would I know that? They can just stay with us. Tom casually responded. Of course, you'll be covering all their living expenses. You should be able to manage that, being a housewife. Just think of it as repaying the favor Vanessa has done for you all these years. Feeling dizzy, I pressed my forehead and closed my eyes. You might feel grateful to her, but all I get from her are sarcastic comments. After all she's done for Jason, that's just not right. Tom smirked condescendingly. When you're away for work, Vanessa comes over so Jason won't feel lonely. Hey, how about we let her adopt Jason? That way, we can all be a real family. I was in disbelief. Are you out of your mind? It's a good idea. You can be mom and Vanessa can be mama. Even if she adopts him, if we live in this house, nothing will change. Jason will be thrilled to have a beautiful mama. He'll definitely brag to his friends. With a smug grin, Tom quickly stood up and commanded loudly. So, bring Jason back quickly. If you want a divorce, hand Jason over to me. At the very least, every month, you'll transfer child support, the house mortgage, and our living expenses to my bank account. You think I'm gonna agree to that? If you don't, I won't agree with getting divorced. With Tom's definitive statement, I chuckled. Fine. Realizing that further discussion was pointless, I swiftly left the house. I had plans of my own. A few days later, as I prepared dinner in my parents' kitchen, my cell phone rang. Answering it, I heard Tom yelling with a tearful voice. You went to Vanessa and ratted me out? She called me a liar. What the hell did you do? Since she seemed unaware of the facts, I enlightened her. I calmly stated. Tom left the big company long ago and now he's a part-timer. We've been living off my salary. I've been paying the mortgage on our lovely house from my earnings for over 5 years. Since she didn't trust me, I let her listen to the conversation I had recorded from yesterday. She was pretty shocked. You sneaky little! You're just jealous of how close Vanessa and I are. What? Are you nuts? I shouted without thinking. If you love Vanessa so much, why don't you work and support her? I hung up angrily and immediately blocked Tom's number. When I reported Tom's behavior to my attorney, I was advised. It might be best to go for a divorce mediation. I wonder if Tom even has the money for that. While pondering this during my lunch break at work, I received a call from the school Jason attends. Fearing he might be sick, I answered. I apologize for calling during your work hours. Are you familiar with a woman named Vanessa Jones? I was taken aback by the sudden question. Yes, she's my husband's sister. Oh, I see. Is something wrong with my sister-in-law? The homeroom teacher seemed hesitant. Well, she was arrested on school grounds just a while ago. What? I nearly knocked over my coffee. The homeroom teacher proceeded to explain. She climbed over the gate, entered the school, and approached Jason while he was switching classes. She persistently talked to him and held his hand, so a friend of his reported to me,
saying some unknown lady was clinging to Jason.
Oh my!
Although she insisted she was his aunt, Jason responded, "I don't know her." So, we called the police. I imagined Vanessa's bewildered face. She kept complaining, "Jason's mother won't let me see him, and every time I visit her family home, they send me away. It's not my fault, it's his mother's for monopolizing him." After being questioned at the police station, she was sent home. I recalled my dad telling me that Vanessa had come to the house multiple times, trying to catch Jason when he got home, but he had chased her away. "I'm really sorry for the trouble." I apologized over the phone. Was Jason too upset? More like angry. He said she's creepy and that he doesn't want to see her anymore. I see. Once home, I would reassure Jason. Promise him he'd never have to see Vanessa again. I hung up the phone, sipped my coffee, and felt a weight off my chest. Vanessa must have been devastated to be treated as a stranger by Jason. Serves her right, I thought, smirking to myself. Tom was initially very resistant to the divorce, but my attorney persuaded him, saying a divorce mediation would be expensive. So he reluctantly agreed. He even consented to the child support amount I proposed. Now, the value of our jointly owned house needs to be determined, and after deducting the remaining mortgage, Tom and I need to split the money. When Tom got a price quote from a realtor and told Vanessa they were selling the house, Vanessa was furious.
You'll take care of our living expenses, and I'll be able to spend more time with Jason. This isn't what we discussed. You want us to rent an apartment? We don't have that kind of money.
I'm broke too.
Sorry, but find a way to move. You said you were a manager at a top-tier company and told me to trust you, but turns out you're just a part-timer. You really let me down, Tom.
It's really your husband's fault, using company money for personal stuff. Clean up your own mess.
What did you say?
After a massive argument, Tom and Vanessa and her husband moved into separate apartments. Tom sold the house and paid off my mortgage debt, but he still has to give me monthly child support. So he took on 5 part-time jobs, working from dawn till dusk, sweating it out just to make ends meet and provide that child support. If he couldn't transfer the child support to my account, I'd have his wages garnished, so I guess Tom is really doing his best. Vanessa and her husband, who borrowed money for moving and initial living expenses, also found jobs and started working. But at Vanessa's workplace, there's Jason's classmate's mother, and word quickly spread about Vanessa sneaking into the school. Vanessa, embarrassed, quickly quit her job and mostly stays at home now. A neighbor recently saw her and remarked that she looked haggard and older than her age. Once the divorce procedure was settled, I moved with Jason to a condo near my parents. In case of sudden late work shifts or weekend duties, my parents help take care of Jason. Jason's always been close to my parents, and as they adore him too, I can trust leaving him with them. I feel so refreshed without having to constantly worry about Vanessa's unexpected visits or seeing Tom lounging on the couch while I'm swamped with housework. I'm open to letting Jason see Tom if he wants to, but Jason seems to have had enough of his dad. Not sure when that might change. In the absence of his father, I, along with my parents, intend to raise Jason with all the love and watch him grow. I'm moving in with my parents. If you object, we're getting a divorce. Out of nowhere, my husband, Bob, said that to me. What do you mean by that? It's just as I said. I'm gonna use that $3 million as I see fit. I've decided to build a duplex with that money. That's all there is to it. I was dumbfounded that Bob, so casually, was talking about spending the $3 million I inherited from my mother's estate. Construction will start next month, and once it's done, we're moving. Prepare accordingly. In the meantime, I'm gonna invite my parents over, so you better take good care of them. If you object, we're getting a divorce. Remember, I'm the head of this household, which means I'm the boss. I'll say it again, if you can't follow my lead, we're getting a divorce. I stared at Bob, trying to gauge if he was in his right mind. All right, but you're gonna regret this.
Shut up, You worthless wife.
Bob, probably assuming I'd cave as usual, confidently walked out the front door. Of course, I didn't follow him. 3 days later. My name is Catherine. I'm 40. I work as a freelance writer. I met Bob at work when I was still employed at a publishing company in New York. Back then, I was 27 and Bob was 29. We quickly became serious and decided to live together, getting officially registered about 6 months later. We had children right away. I took some time off from work to raise them, and when things settled down, I resumed working as a freelance writer. We have 2 kids. An 11-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. Both are healthy and attending elementary school. Thanks to my job, I'm mostly home-based. I'm always there to welcome the kids when they come back from school, ensuring they don't feel lonely. Bob works in sales, often coming home late. But occasionally, we'd take the kids to places like amusement parks or to watch movies. Life was pretty rhythmic and harmonious. Currently, we're renting a place, but once the kids grow up a bit more, we plan to build a house on a plot we like. We've saved up for that. I was satisfied with our life, but sometimes misfortune strikes when least expected. My mother was suddenly diagnosed with an incurable illness. It was so advanced that the only thing left to do was to make sure she was comfortable. When I say satisfied with life, I'm talking about my immediate family, my husband and children. But when it comes to parents, it's a different story. My dad passed away when I was in high school due to illness. Thankfully, we owned our house, and with my father's insurance, the mortgage was paid off. My mom had a job, so we weren't financially struggling. However, with no grandparents or reliable relatives to turn to, and being the only child, I knew my mom must have felt lonely and faced hardships. Despite all this, I was fortunate not to struggle financially. I even went to college. And after getting a job, I contributed a bit to the household. I was able to focus on my passion without many constraints. When I got married, I moved out of my childhood home. My in-laws weren't too thrilled about us living in the area where I grew up. They've been farmers for generations. And are still active in their 60s. I admire their work ethic, but they have outdated views, especially regarding gender roles. Bob moved to New York for college, and after graduating, he got a job there, where he met and married me. His parents didn't like this.
Quit your job and help us out on the farm, Catherine.
His dad would say even before we got married. I have my job too, so I can't move back. And what would I do there anyway? There's no work for me in Nebraska, right? Bob said that and managed to persuade my in-laws. They grudgingly allowed us to continue living in this town, where my family is from. However, every time something happens, they would call me and complain. Well, my parents have made various compromises for us. I know it's annoying, but please bear with their occasional calls. I thought, well, it can't be helped, and put up with it. I know my mother appreciated having her daughter and son-in-law nearby and tried to be considerate to my in-laws. Thinking of it as a way to show gratitude to both sets of parents helped me endure it. My in-laws, however, have made several aggravating remarks in the past. When our eldest daughter, Lily, was born, the first thing they said was,
"Why didn't you give birth to a male heir?
And,
on top of not living with us, you can't even have a boy. Why did Bob choose a wife like you?"
They said all this before even offering congratulations. To this, Bob responded, "People in the countryside have those values, just let them say what they want to say." I was annoyed, but I decided to ignore their comments, understanding that we came from different backgrounds. And a year later, when our son James was born, there were cheers of,
"Well done."
And, "Now I can finally accept you as a part of the Smith family." I was surprised when they added,
"Bring him over to show everyone."
After all, to get to my in-laws' place, you'd need to take a plane and then a train, which at the very least takes 4 hours. There's no way I can take a newborn and a 1-year-old that far. Bob seemed to want to go and show off to his parents, perhaps because they praised him, but I said,
"Aren't you worried about your own kids? It's nice if your parents want to see them, but there's no way I'm taking them." If you insist on going, I'll leave this house. After hearing that, he finally gave up. I even had to remind my in-laws of the consequences, asking them if they were okay if something happened to their heir, after which they begrudgingly gave in. But they were relentless in their phone calls to me. Still, I endured it all for the sake of protecting my children. In the end, my in-laws never did come over. The reason, of course, was the distance. From their home, it's an hour's drive to the nearest train station, a 2-hour train ride with a few transfers to the closest airport station, and then another hour by plane. Just the travel time is 4 hours, but considering layovers, you'd probably need an additional 2 hours or so. In other words, it takes a good half day to travel. Even for the sake of their grandkids, for my in-laws who hardly ever leave their hometown, the distance felt like they were traveling to the other side of the world. It was a pity that we couldn't let them see their grandchild very often because of the distance. However, since they didn't come to visit either, we compromised on this matter and made an effort to send lots of photos and show our concern. The first time we took our kids to visit my husband's parents was after they started kindergarten. Figuring it was about time, Bob adjusted his work schedule, and we chose a time outside the peak holiday season to ensure a smoother trip. My in-laws seemed delighted, but it was primarily directed towards their grandson, James. They almost completely ignored our daughter. This made me feel uncomfortable, and I wished we didn't have to visit again. Around that time, Bob's job became hectic, and it became harder to get time off. Since then, we haven't visited his parents once. I felt genuinely relieved. Since my own parents lived nearby, we visited them regularly. I did feel somewhat guilty about this, but given the way we were treated by my in-laws, I justified it in my mind. Bob seemed okay with it, and though I felt it was a bit irresponsible, we let it be. That was until the recent event. When I learned about my mother's illness and until she passed away, I tried to be with her as much as possible. Whenever she felt better, I would bring the kids to see her, ensuring we had no regrets. My in-laws had complaints about this.
"You're always letting them see your mom but never us."
I was stunned to hear these words. After all, the situations were entirely different. My mother had a limited time left. She was soon going to be gone. Did they really understand this and still had the audacity to say such things? I broke down and spoke to Bob about it, but all he said was,
"Maybe it's because I told them over the phone that the kids were visiting their grandma. Just try to bear with it."
I felt disappointed in Bob. It had always been this way. Bob always left me to deal with issues related to his in-laws. He simply asked me to bear with them. He never defended me when they said anything against me, and it seemed like he didn't intend to. I, on the other hand, had never been told anything about my mother, so I always felt indebted to deal with his parents on my own. I realized at this moment that he was that kind of person. The trust and affection I had for Bob faded at this time. But, if I had any spare time to be upset about this, I thought I should visit my mother. Regardless of what his parents said, I stood my ground and didn't let them affect me. Up until the last day of my mother's life. There were many thoughts, but I couldn't keep crying. People can become strong for the ones they need to protect. I am now a mother myself, I can't just be my mother's daughter. Later, while sorting things out, I discovered something astonishing. My mother had a safe deposit box at the bank. Inside it, to my surprise, were gold bars. They were in a significant amount and seemed to have been purchased a long time ago. Apparently, she bought them with the insurance money from my father. There were also stocks. Converting all of it to the current value. That's like $3 million. It was beyond shocking. And in the safe, there was also a letter written by my mother. It said that with my father's insurance, there was no need to pay the house mortgage and she was working. I wasn't a child who needed a lot of money. The money she saved was kept as golden stocks for when it might be needed. She hoped it would be used wisely if something happened to her. Reading this, I felt my mother's emotions deeply and hugged the letter, crying. People often say, even between spouses, not to disclose the amount of inheritance, but I couldn't keep this amount a secret and told Bob about it.
$3 million! Bob was speechless. Neither of us could find words for a while. What are you gonna do with that 3 million? Bob finally broke the silence. What do you mean, what am I gonna do? I was perplexed. For now, I plan to wait until the inheritance is settled. I'm the only heir, so I don't think there'll be any problems. Yeah, I guess so. Bob said, seemingly lost in thought, looking up as if calculating something. I just thought I'd let you know, I said, leaving the room while he seemed distracted. Soon after, I completed the inheritance procedures, and the $3 million was transferred to my name. As soon as that happened, we're moving in with my parents. If you oppose, we're getting a divorce, Bob suddenly declared. What are you talking about? Just what I said. I'll use that 3 million as I see fit. I've decided to build a 2-family home with it. I was dumbfounded by Bob's casual response. What on earth do you mean? Don't you get it? I genuinely don't. I really don't get it. How did we suddenly end up on this topic? You lack not only self-awareness but also empathy, Catherine. Bob sighed as he said that. Catherine, what do you think about how you've treated my parents all these years? Treated them? I don't understand. Honestly, I remember many things they did to me, but I hardly did anything to them. You always took care of your mother and ignored my parents, didn't you? What? It felt like a sudden punch to the gut. You often took our kids to see your parents, but only took them to mine once because they lived too far. Didn't I have a good reason for that? You never even invited my parents over. No, I asked them several times, but they always said they didn't want to travel from Nebraska because it's too far. Even for our wedding, despite many of Bob's colleagues attending, we had to hold ceremonies in both New York and Nebraska because they didn't want to travel far. Does he not remember that? Anyway, you've made my parents endure a lot. I think it's fair I use that money to take care of them now. Is this who Bob really is? I always thought he was just a regular husband, a regular father. As I stood there stunned, Bob continued. I've always been unhappy with how you treated my parents. But there aren't jobs back in Nebraska, so I put up with it. Watching you pamper your parents, I've always wanted to do the same. But hey, I'm the bigger person here, so I kept quiet just to keep peace at home. What? I kept silent, figuring I should hear him out completely since he is, after all, my husband. But now that we have this huge sum of money, things change. I don't need to hustle in this demanding job here. I'll quit and go back to Nebraska. We'll build a duplex, and I'll take care of my parents. When I mentioned my mother's inheritance, was he scheming this all along while looking into the sky? Little did I know he was making all these plans in his head. Bob, looking straight into my eyes, made this declaration. Next month, we'll start construction. Once it's done, we're moving. So, you better prepare. Meanwhile, I'll invite my parents over. Make sure you take care of them. If you can't, we're getting divorced. Remember this, Catherine, I'm the head of this household. I'm the boss here. If you can't follow what I say, we're getting divorced. I tried to gauge whether Bob was in his right mind by looking deep into his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot. He could be sane or insane, it's hard to tell. But one thing was clear, he was blinded by the $3 million. I could almost see the wads of cash in his pupils. No. I responded firmly. What did you say? I won't live with your parents, Bob. And I won't move to Nebraska. I'm not uprooting our kids either. And at this point, I can't welcome your parents here. Then, we'll get divorced. Bob, glaring at me, declared. Fine, let's divorce. But let me tell you one thing. You sure you won't regret this? Shut up, you worthless wife! Bob stormed out of the house and didn't return. 3 days later. Hey, what's going on? Out of the blue, Bob called. What are you talking about? The golden stocks. The safe deposit box is empty. That. Well, I moved them elsewhere. It's not strange they aren't there. Why did you do that without telling me? It's my inheritance, Bob. I can do whatever I want with it,
can't I? I told you I'd use it as I see fit.
Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I don't recall agreeing to that.
Where did you hide it?
I didn't hide it. I left it with my attorney.
What did you say?
I let out a sigh. And then kindly explained. When it comes to inheritance, there's this thing called inheritance tax. Inherit something like $3 million, who knows how much tax will be levied. So, I left it with the attorney to sell only the necessary amount to pay the tax. Seems like a reasonable move. So, I asked for that during the inheritance procedure, right?
Go get it back now. And give me the money from the sale.
Why should I do that for you, a stranger to me now?
What?
Bob seemed confused by my words. I'll say it again. Why should I do that for you, a stranger?
We're married, aren't we?
I sighed again, deciding to clarify kindly. You know, you said you wanted a divorce. Right after that, I immediately contacted a divorce attorney and the proceedings are already underway. Soon, you and I will be strangers.
Why'd you do something so rash?
Weren't you the one who brought up the divorce?
That was just a strategy to get you to agree on the inheritance.
I was flabbergasted. The audacity to say such a thing so boldly. Anyway, I've already made payments to the lawyer, and if things continue this way, you and I will soon be strangers to each other. Even if we were still married, you would have no rights whatsoever.
Hey, we're married! Don't be so cold.
Bob's voice was almost tearful. So, we'll soon no longer be husband and wife. By the way, I didn't realize until I heard it on this call, but you took the key to the safe deposit box without telling me, didn't you? Bob remained silent. It was an empty box, and I was thinking of canceling it anyway. But if you were trying to take its contents without my knowledge, that's theft.
You're calling your husband a thief?
You'll soon no longer be husband. Oh, but when you took the key, we were still married, right? I'll have to consult with a lawyer about what that means. Upon hearing this, Bob began to shout something incomprehensible over the phone. I can't understand what you're saying, so I'm gonna hang up, I said, blocking his number. That night, I got a call from the in-laws. I'd blocked Bob's number but forgot about theirs. This was their grievance.
We've already started demolishing the house for reconstruction, and now you're telling us to stop? You think that's gonna fly? We've already hired the contractor. He's told everyone about this big $3 million job he's got. Bring the money now. If you apologize, we'll still accept you as our daughter-in-law.
To avoid further hassle, I decided to patiently listen to their ranting. It seemed Bob had already returned to their home and begun reconstruction procedures while I was handling the inheritance. He probably thought if he presented it as a done deal, I'd just go along with it. From what I gathered, they had finished demolishing the old guest house.
The main house is full with the guest house stuff. What are you gonna do about it? Come right now and help clean up.
But I never asked for that. Have you finished saying what you wanted to?
If so, I only have this one thing to say from my side. My divorce with Bob is already finalized. Therefore, you and I are now strangers to each other. Goodbye.
I then blocked their number too. I took my children and hid in a different location for safety. As expected, Bob and his parents came to our house and, finding us gone, reported us missing to the police. But I had already discussed everything with my attorney, including our finalized divorce, the stolen safety deposit box key, and the recorded phone conversations. The lawyer clarified things with the police for me. Distraught, Bob and his parents approached my lawyer, begging him to hand over a letter to me. When the lawyer contacted me about it, I requested that it be forwarded to me. The letter read, "We've asked the contractor to hold off for a bit, and they've only dismantled the old annex so far, but they keep asking when they can resume. I completely forgot about the inheritance tax. Given the tax situation, I want to downsize the reconstruction with whatever budget remains after taxes. Now that you've lost your mother, the only grandparents our kids have are my parents. Please don't deprive them of their grandparents. You should make amends by being kind to my parents. Living together, familial affection will surely develop soon." And other such cringeworthy phrases. Moreover, do you mistakenly think that a woman has to wait 6 months to remarry? There's no such rule for couples. Let's reconcile immediately. Was written, making me roll my eyes even harder. Of course, I had my lawyer relay a firm no to all of Bob's requests, warned him to have no more interactions with me, and alerted him that any further stalking would be reported to the police. According to my lawyer, it seemed Bob had already started the procedures to quit his job. In his haste, he tried to reverse his decision, but his company was already in the middle of downsizing, so they didn't allow it. After receiving his severance, Bob reluctantly returned to his hometown. With the money, he managed to appease the contractor, halting the reconstruction. However, I heard he'd completely lost his reputation back home and now lives in the old family house in cramped conditions. I decided to move far away to ensure Bob and his parents couldn't find me. My job is remote, so moving didn't cause any issues. It's a blessing in this modern age. I told my kids their dad was away for work, and surprisingly, they accepted it without much fuss. I thought Bob had a good relationship with them, but now it seems it wasn't that great after all. Come to think of it, it felt like Bob only interacted when he felt like it. It seemed like he wasn't truly listening to what I said, always asking for patience. Maybe he had the same kind of superficial relationship with our kids too. I'll keep the inheritance safe for the kids' future. It's a safety net for emergencies. Just like my mother raised me with steady guidance, I'll ensure my kids grow into grounded individuals. The baby's crying was so loud that I changed the locks. Well, what am I supposed to do then? When I asked Michael, for some reason, I heard my in-laws' voices in response. Both you and the kid can sleep on the streets. Following those unbelievable words, I could also hear my in-laws laughing. So, they're in on it too, huh? Realizing that, I said with a sigh. All right, wherever I sleep, don't complain. Huh? Both my in-laws and Michael were dumbfounded. They probably thought I had nowhere to go. But tough luck for them. I never thought I'd be locked out, but I do have a place to go. And that place happens to be inconvenient for them. Well, they can regret it after I'm gone. I don't care what they say later. Right now, all that matters to me is Barbara. If I can protect her, I don't care if you all go down in flames. With that resolve, I turned my back on my in-laws' house. My name is Susan. Next month, I'll be celebrating my 30th birthday. I'm a stay-at-home mom, but right now, I'm not doing any housework. Of course, I'm not just slacking off. You see, Barbara was born just 2 weeks ago, so I'm currently resting. That's why I'm not doing any chores. However, Michael doesn't seem to care. Why aren't you doing any housework? Just want to slack off? Even my father-in-law, who was with his wife during childbirth, seems clueless. People usually get back to housework the next day. It's astonishing that he'd say something like that. Doesn't anyone understand me? Things aren't going well with my husband, and there's a distance between me and my in-laws. I don't have my parents anymore, and I have no family to rely on. But even if I'm all alone, I must protect Barbara at all costs. That thought kept me going. Maybe getting married was a mistake. I've been thinking that a lot lately. But until we got married, both Michael and my in-laws were kind. Especially my in-laws, they even offered to cover the wedding costs, which shows how considerate they were towards me. Can we really accept the money for the wedding? It's our only son's wedding, Susan. We can't be stingy, or we'll be the laughingstock of our family. Saying this, my mother-in-law chuckled. My father-in-law felt the same at that time. Both Michael and I work in the bridal industry. Some of our company colleagues will be attending, so we can't have a wedding that's embarrassing. Michael and my father-in-law work at the same bridal company. It's pretty well known in our local area, say, kinda like a recognized company in Nebraska. Moreover, they have a broad range of businesses. Their primary focus is on wedding venues, but they seem to also manage restaurants for wedding after-party and such. So, most of the attendees were deeply familiar with weddings. Guess that means we couldn't have a cheap-looking wedding. Now I understand why they offered to cover the expenses. So, with the help of my in-laws, Michael and I had a rather lavish wedding. But the good times ended there. Once we got married and I began living in their home, they started to make demands.
Hey, Susan? You're not expecting yet?
Well. I gave a vague response. My mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh.
Oh boy, you're not too helpful, are ya?
Excuse me? Not helpful? I quickly retorted. But she just looked away. It's nothing. She brushed it off in an obvious manner. I was like, wait, is this what they call the cold shoulder? The thought briefly crossed my mind. But I have still felt indebted because of the wedding expenses. In the end, I couldn't muster the courage to confront her directly. On the other hand, my father-in-law treats me like I'm some sort of maid.
Hey, where are the snacks?
Sorry, I'll get them right now.
You should have had it ready before I got back. Some wife you are.
He started to grumble. I was taken aback. Some wife. What's that supposed to mean? Do I also need to look after him? I married Michael and became his wife. So I'm committed to him. Of course, I want to do my best for my in-laws too. But being ordered around feels a bit different. I wonder if this is how they truly feel about me. I was baffled by the sudden change in my in-laws' attitude. However, I didn't have the guts to stand up to them. I thought if I did, they'd kick me out. I quit my job when we got married. I don't have much savings left. Moreover, I don't have my parents. Meaning, if we were to divorce, I'd have no one to turn to. Out of fear, I couldn't defy my in-laws. Even when my mother-in-law picked on me, or when my father-in-law treated me like a maid, I had no choice but to endure. I've suppressed my feelings deep inside. Then, about 6 months after our marriage, one day, I felt sick as I was about to prepare breakfast and collapsed on the spot. What? What's wrong? My mother-in-law asked, sounding annoyed. I just feel a bit dizzy. You're so clumsy. I'm sorry, just a moment. Saying that, I rushed to the bathroom. But my condition didn't improve.
Hey! What the heck are you doing, Susan? Leaving your chores and doing what?
Sorry.
That's not good enough. I'm off to work, so make sure you finish the housework. Got it?
Michael shouted. I felt too sick to even respond. A few hours passed, and I finally felt better. But my mother-in-law was waiting for me in the living room.
Found a good excuse to slack off, huh?
I didn't mean to slack off. Don't talk back to me. Just clean and do the laundry. I flinched at her loud voice. She kept glaring at me, unaware of how I felt. Guess I just gotta do it. With a sigh, I started the chores. I managed to get through that day. But my health didn't fully recover. Feeling something was off, a few days later, I went to the doctor. Turns out, I was pregnant. I hurried home to report to my mother-in-law first. To my surprise, she suddenly changed her attitude.
Oh. You were pregnant? Why didn't you say so sooner?
She grinned at me. And then, she quickly started making a call.
It's been a while. You know, my son's wife is pregnant.
Judging from the conversation, it seemed she was bragging to a relative. Maybe she'll be a bit kinder to me now. That was the hope I clung to. But I was wrong. Even after learning about my pregnancy, my in-laws treated me the same. Even worse, I overheard my father-in-law saying something.
Once the heir is born, we don't need her. We could even let her go.
He was happily chatting on the phone with an acquaintance. I was utterly taken aback. All they really wanted was an heir. I kind of knew it from the way they treated me. But hearing it out loud made it all the more painful. I bit my lip and continued with the housework. Of course, I thought about discussing this with Michael. But right after finding out about my pregnancy, Michael started coming home late. When I asked him why, Michael replied with a sharp tone. You're pregnant, so I've done my part as a husband, haven't I?
What do you mean?
If a wife doesn't get pregnant, folks talk, right? I just did my part to help with that. And so, Michael just rambled on with his selfish reasoning.
What the heck, Michael? Stop joking around. Enough. All you need to do is give birth. That's your duty as a wife.
Michael looked at me as if he married me out of obligation. At that moment, everything became clear. Michael wasn't going to support me. In fact, he wasn't even on my side. I was all alone here. Besides, my in-laws were never kind to me. They were just kind to ensure their heir and to have someone do the housework. Realizing that, my spirit broke. All my love and feelings for Michael vanished. Oh, yes. I'm gonna divorce him once the baby is born. From that day on, that's what I started thinking. In that case, I need to be prepared for the divorce. In the short time before giving birth, I hired someone to investigate Michael and my in-laws. And soon, the day came for me to give birth. A beautiful baby girl was born. I named her as Barbara. The day we brought Barbara home, both my in-laws and Michael were thrilled. However, their expressions gradually darkened. And then, tragedy struck. It was on the day of Barbara's 1-month checkup. After the checkup, I was given a ride by Mr. Smith, the CEO of Michael's company. Apparently, Mr. Smith's daughter had given birth around the same time I had. So, we ended up having our checkups together, and I got a ride due to Mr. Smith's kindness. But there was a problem when we got to my house. For some reason, the front door key wouldn't work. I knocked at the door and called out. "Hey, Michael? I can't open the door." From inside, I heard Michael's voice.
The baby kept crying at night, so I changed the lock. You changed the front door lock without telling me?
When I asked him that, Michael raised his voice.
She cries all day. I want to enjoy some quiet time, so don't come back. So, what am I supposed to do?
When I asked Michael, surprisingly, I heard my in-laws respond.
You and the kid can sleep on the streets.
Following that unbelievable statement, I could hear my in-laws laughing. So, they're in on this too, huh? Realizing that, I responded sarcastically.
Fine, don't complain wherever I end up sleeping.
Huh? Both my in-laws and Michael sounded shocked. They probably thought I had nowhere to go. But joke's on them. I didn't expect to be locked out, but I have somewhere to go. And that place will be inconvenient for all of you. They'll regret it later. And I won't care about what they say then. Right now, the only thing that matters to me is Barbara. If I can protect her, I don't care if you all go down. I made up my mind and turned my back on my in-laws. I then approached Mr. Smith. You heard everything, right? Of course, I did. So, about what we discussed earlier, could you help me? I asked Mr. Smith. By the way, that conversation was about something Mr. Smith had mentioned during the ride. Actually, there are several postnatal care hotels. Mr. Smith's company, which is into the bridal business, was also considering incorporating this postnatal care. From marriage to childbirth, to raising kids. I really want to have a long-term relationship with our customers. That's what Mr. Smith had been saying. And he'd approached me, asking if I wanted to be a consumer monitor their plan. I posed a question and Mr. Smith nodded in agreement. Let me guide you through it. Thank you. That being said, I can't stand that attitude. Mr. Smith looked sternly at Michael's in-laws. Probably contemplating some form of retribution for Michael and the other two. Well, as a company CEO, it's hard to ignore such things. Especially if the company is venturing into the children's business. With that thought, I made a proposal to Mr. Smith. Upon hearing the plan I'd thought of even before giving birth, Mr. Smith nodded deeply. Let's collaborate on that proposal. Thank you. That's how I gained a powerful ally. However, I was dead tired. So, they had me transported straight to a postnatal care facility, kind of like a luxury facility. Thanks to Mr. Smith's influence, I got to stay in a premium suite. The postnatal care plan experience was top-notch. The facility had specialized staff like midwives available 24/7. The support was comprehensive, and many amenities were provided for relaxation. There were other new moms around, and for the first time in a while, I could really take it easy. I wish I could stay here forever. That feeling just came out of my mouth. I could really rest. And then, the next day, Mr. Smith came to visit me. In front of me, he called Michael. Soon, Michael answered. "Ah, is that you, Michael? Sorry to disturb you during your break." "No worries. What can I do for you?" "Well, actually, I have a favor to ask." After a brief pause, Mr. Smith continued. "I'd like you guys to be models for our brochure. Can you do it?" "You mean my wife, daughter, and I?" "Look, your daughter was just born, right? She'd be perfect for the brochure." True, for a bridal-related brochure, they'd be the ideal choice. But Michael had just kicked me out. There's no way he'd agree under these circumstances, right? I couldn't help but smirk. If Michael refused a direct request from the president himself, there's no way it wouldn't impact his career advancement. That was my plan, to damage Michael. But Michael immediately accepted without hesitation. "Sure thing. I got this." I was flustered. Now, I can't damage Michael. My plan was a total bust. Just when I thought that, Mr. Smith smirked. Then, Mr. Smith said to Michael, "Can you come to the studio right away? How about in an hour?" "Wait, in an hour?" "Yeah, I'll get the crew ready, so." As Mr. Smith was speaking, Michael interrupted in a panic. "Hold on a sec. Today's a bit. What's the matter?"
Well, I have to discuss with my wife."
Michael began to fumble for words. Seems he thought he could convince me if he had more time. That's what you get for agreeing without thinking. Serves him right. I couldn't help but grin. "Why don't you talk to her now? Your daughter was just born. She's right there with you, isn't she?" Mr. Smith added salt to the wound. Michael was completely silent. In the end, Michael said he'd consult and hung up the phone. Needless to say, I was bombarded with calls right after. Of course, I ignored them all. For about 30 minutes, my cell phone was ringing off the hook. But it seems he finally gave up, and my phone went silent. Immediately after, Mr. Smith's phone rang. "Well, my wife says she's embarrassed." I never said any such thing. As I thought that, Mr. Smith let out a very audible sigh. "Really, can't even persuade your own wife?" "No, it's not like that. I'm really disappointed in you." As soon as Mr. Smith said that, a loud apology started, loud enough for me to hear. "I'm so sorry. I promise I'll persuade her." The voice of his apology sounded like Michael was making desperate efforts to convince me in front. After letting Michael apologize for a while, Mr. Smith ended the call. Then, he dialed up my father-in-law. "Hello? Hello. Mr. Smith. What can I do for you? Actually, I have a gift for you. Would you accept it?" Saying so, Mr. Smith looked at me. I smiled and nodded. "Do you know that we run a restaurant for parties?" "Of course. I'm thinking of lending it to you." "Wait, lend it out?" My father-in-law must have been puzzled. The truth is, this was all part of my plan. First, Mr. Smith would personally offer the spacious restaurant for Michael's father. And then, have a party for the grandchild there. Once the 1-month checkup is done, it's about time for the baby to go out for walks. That's the time for a party to show our baby around then. Any regular family might jump at this offer with joy. But our situation is different. Michael just kicked me out, so there's no way I'd accept his invitation. So, my father-in-law began to panic and make excuses.
"No, it's just,
What? Are you gonna decline my gift?" "No, I'd never. It's just that we have to consider Susan and the baby's health." My father-in-law started making up reasons. I was irritated. Then, Mr. Smith interjected. Was there a problem at the 1-month checkup?
No, it's not like that, but…
Then, have a party there. Don't worry about the costs, I'll cover it. As for the date. Mr. Smith kept moving the conversation forward. All the while, I could hear my father-in-law's flustered voice. He's panicking, wonder what he's gonna do. I was holding back my laughter. Eventually, Mr. Smith finished talking and abruptly hung up. Right then, my phone started ringing. It's from my father-in-law. Grinning, I held my phone. Well, what should I do? No need to even ask about my father-in-law's business. So, I could just ignore it. But ignoring isn't fun. And I'd be left feeling frustrated. So, I picked up. Hello. Susan? His voice was louder than usual. He must be really panicked. Either way, I responded with an annoyed tone. Oh, is that you? Thank God. Susan, please listen to me. Huh? No thanks. I replied sharply. My father-in-law looked stunned for a moment, but quickly gathered himself, pleading with me.
Don't say that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime request, please.
At that point, I felt like I had the upper hand. Trying to hide my amusement, I asked. What's going on? Well, I have a favor to ask. He began to relay what Mr. Smith had told him. However, it all seemed too convenient to me. He didn't mention any instructions from Mr. Smith, nor did he specify a date and time. He just kept going on about wanting to have a party and how he'd rent out a place. So, I bluntly refused. I decline. After all, I was kicked out. No, that's not it. The thing is, my father-in-law started to rattle off excuses. Losing my patience, I raised my voice.
If you send me a video you apologize to me, I'll consider attending that party.
Well, he was at a loss for words.
Send me that video. If it checks out, I'll go. Bye.
With that, I hung up the phone. He surely wouldn't take himself go as far as apologizing to me. I was too confident about that. However, contrary to what I thought, a video of my father-in-law begging was sent to my cell phone. This threw a wrench into my plans. I was gonna make the party a flop and have him apologize to Mr. Smith. I'd have to come up with something else. Seeing my troubled face, Mr. Smith, sitting next to me, offered some advice. How about this for the debut party? I listened intently. It was indeed an intriguing idea. Moreover, I could get one over on both Michael and my in-laws. I'll go with that. I immediately started getting ready. A few days went by, and the day of the party Mr. Smith had set came around. Of course, I hadn't been back to my in-laws' place. In fact, I hadn't even been in touch with Michael or my in-laws. A little suspense never hurt anyone, right? Thinking that, I headed to the venue with Mr. Smith. Peeking into the venue, I could see my in-laws being grilled by relatives. What's going on? Why aren't they here? Something's not right. Well. My father-in-law was sweating bullets. Some other relatives were confronting Michael. You didn't leave the house with your wife? No, I mean, there's no way we could leave together. After all, we weren't living together. Still, I felt bad for keeping everyone waiting. Slowly, Mr. Smith and I entered the venue. Thank you for waiting. Finally. My father-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. Michael, on the other hand, rushed up to me. What have you been up to, Susan? Excuse me? Preparing for this event, duh? Preparations, but where's Barbara? Michael quickly looked around in a panic. Even though he had been neglecting her all this time, I replied with a sigh. I've left Barbara with a babysitter today. What? Then, what about the party? I've prepared a slideshow. That's enough, isn't it? Saying that, I brushed past Michael. Then, I began explaining to the gathered relatives. I couldn't bring Barbara here, but I've prepared a slideshow for you all. While I spoke, a staff member began setting up the slideshow. Checking that, I continued my speech. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, but please enjoy this. With my signal, soft music began to play. The venue dimmed. At the same time, several photos were projected onto the screen. Immediately, gasps echoed throughout the room. What's this? Displayed on the screen were photos of Michael's affair, followed by photos of my father-in-law's affair.
You've gotta be kidding me. You're the worst.
Naturally, seeing the photo, Michael and his father went pale. But quickly, Michael dashed to stop the slideshow.
Stop it. Turn it off.
Really? You brought this on yourself, didn't you?
This is your doing. Why would you do such a thing?
Michael shouted at me. So, I shot back.
It's because you locked Barbara and me out. You changed the front door locks while we weren't home.
The room went silent. Then, murmurs began. Locked out? What's going on? Amidst the whispers, I exposed the conversation from when our house keys were changed. I also mentioned that Mr. Smith was there. That's a lie, right? Sorry, but it's true. Mr. Smith witnessed it and helped me out. As I said that, Mr. Smith nodded.
It's over. This is the end for me.
Michael crumbled. Looking back, his father was in total shock. Going forward, our company's gonna expand into children's business. So, we don't need employees who can't care for children. It wasn't my fault. I was just sleep deprived.
No excuses. Resign on your own. If not, I'm ready to fire you even if it causes a scene.
The determination of the president was intense. In the end, Michael and his father resigned immediately. After that, I proposed a divorce to Michael. Having those revealing photos of his affair made our divorce process smooth. Additionally, Michael settled by paying me child support for Barbara. He just got cash out his leave, so he wouldn't struggle for money right now. Interestingly, his mistress claimed she didn't know Michael was already married. She's now seeking compensation from Michael. Looks like they're gonna have quite a dispute, but it's none of my business. By the way, my in-laws seem to be sticking together. They actually want to divorce, but all their savings went to Michael's legal fees. To support their immediate living expenses, they're selling their family home and moving into an apartment. Considering they also have to pay child support, they'll need to tighten their belts and live frugally. On my end, I was approached by Mr. Smith regarding job offer. He was like, we've got someone leaving soon. How about working for us? Barbara's still young, but I need to work to make ends meet. So, I'm thinking I'll take up Mr. Smith's job offer in a little while. For now, I just want to quietly spend precious moments with Barbara. After all the hardships I've faced, I think I deserve that little luxury. You can finally see, can't you? The first smile I saw on John's face wasn't so much one of joy at my restored vision as it was one that seemed to mock me for regaining it. Do you remember anything when you look at me? John said, testing me. Even with that provocation, I couldn't recall ever having seen him, nor did anything come to mind. As I shook my head, John sighed and began to reveal the truth.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? You still don't get it? You married me. From now on, you'll be working as my wife. I was taken aback by his words, and in my panic, I dashed out of the hospital room.
This isn't a joke. If I knew it was you, I would have never married. This marriage is void.
You signed the marriage document yourself, didn't you? There's no way it can be voided. You'll pay for rejecting me 2 years ago. He said, a smug expression on his face, implying that my breaking up with him was a crime. I paled at his claims, having unwittingly fallen into his scheme. However, after learning the truth, I vowed to exact thorough revenge on him. My name is Catherine Miller. I turned 31 this year. I had been in a relationship with a man I considered marrying, but I broke it off 2 years ago. The reason was that he explicitly said I was to be a caregiver for his parents. Moreover, he had numerous unreasonable demands like living with his parents, doing all the house chores, but also contributing financially. Even when I voiced that these conditions were too much, he brushed me off, saying, "Don't be so spoiled," and tried to push his agenda. Though I was serious about him, knowing his true nature, I couldn't stand it and initiated the breakup. When we parted, he tried all sorts of ways to persuade me, even resorting to saying that I wasted his time and that he had taken pity on me. I thought I was fortunate to have broken up with him before marriage. That was 2 years ago. After that, I changed jobs and relocated, but an accident left me severely injured, causing me to lose my sight. For a while, I had to stay in the hospital, and I had to explain my situation to my workplace and take a leave of absence.
It's terrifying. They haven't caught the perpetrator, have they?
Yeah. It was late at night, and there were no clear witnesses. Returning home from work one evening, I was hit by a car that ran a red light, sustaining severe injuries. Luckily, though there were few pedestrians, someone managed to call an ambulance. Due to the poorly lit street, no one could remember the car. Living a life of inconvenience without my sight, I was assisted by my mother, Emma. Then one day, an unfamiliar man visited my hospital room.
"This is Ms. Miller's room, correct?"
"Excuse me, but who might you be?" "Nice to meet you. My name is John Thompson." This man who introduced himself as Mike seemed to have known me from work. Neither my mother nor I recognized his name, but he explained he had fallen for me at first sight at the workplace.
"I was deeply attracted to how efficiently and meticulously you worked."
"Oh. I'm sorry, I must seem like a suspicious person. When I didn't see you at work, I asked around and learned about your hospitalization. I couldn't sit still and came to visit you."
"Is that so? Thank you for taking the time to visit."
Mike, appearing a bit embarrassed, left some gifts and went home. Both my mother and I were puzzled, but I was secretly pleased to know someone had noticed and appreciated my efforts at work. Completely unaware of the impending events. From that day, Mike diligently visited almost daily, offering unwavering support.
"John wants to cover your hospital bills. Such a good man, isn't he?"
"What? Why would he do that?"
"He wants you as his wife. He's not a kind person."
Hearing such a story from my mother about John only added to my confusion. Yet, John didn't seem bothered and continued being kind to us. I became increasingly drawn to his kindness, and it didn't take long for me to become interested in him. "I brought a popular cake today."
"Thank you. That's very thoughtful. Why don't you take a walk with Catherine today, John?"
"I'm sorry, but I have work later." While John didn't hesitate to provide financial support, he seemed reluctant to involve himself much in my hospital life. Most of our conversations during his visits seemed to revolve more around his work and his personal achievements than my health. Still, I believed John when he said, "When it comes to daily life, it's better for family to handle than a man like me." After all, he was taking time out of his busy schedule to visit, and I should be grateful to know more about him. I shouldn't think he's like my ex, always talking about himself. There were aspects that concerned me. However, being visually impaired and having John show genuine interest made me overlook these red flags. The weeks went by with him by my side during my hospitalization, and eventually, the idea of marriage came to the forefront. John didn't hide his feelings for me and often alluded to marriage. I took it as a roundabout approach and found it endearing. In fact, a woman I proposed to previously turned me down harshly. "But if I were to marry anyone, I've always thought it should be you, Catherine."
"Really? If you think I'm the one, then yes."
Around that time, my eye surgery was scheduled. I mentioned filing the marriage certificate after the surgery, but John was adamant that we should do it sooner.
"Why the rush? We could fill it out after the surgery, couldn't we?"
"No need to think about that. Trust me, just do as I say." Perhaps I should have taken his haste as a sign of something being amiss. But by then, John's mother had visited my room, and we even had a meet and greet with our parents. His mother consistently praised me, saying I'd make a wonderful bride. Although we weren't married yet, the two of them seemed eager, always talking about our future life together. Given all their discussions, I assumed John was eagerly awaiting our union. Plus, with my mother's approval of John, I didn't see any reason to delay the marriage. So, without giving it much thought, I signed the marriage certificate. It's hard to write on a paper you can't see. Mom, did I sign it correctly?
It's fine, dear. You signed it perfectly.
Thank you. I'll submit this then. With that, John quickly left the room. Was he busy with work or some other reason? It bothered me that even before marriage, we couldn't communicate well. But he was financially supporting me. Once I recover my sight, I thought, I'll thank him properly and then discuss our future. That's how optimistic I was.
I'm so happy. It's like a dream. Marrying Catherine.
You're exaggerating.
I want to hold the wedding ceremony soon. My mom would be thrilled.
Let's first focus on successfully completing the surgery. To John's eagerness about the ceremony, I often responded with, "Let's wait until my eyesight returns." It was a tragic accident, but I believed that once I overcame this surgery, I would find happiness. I realized everything had been a deception when the day came to finally remove my eye bandages after the surgery. Eagerly anticipating the moment I would finally see John's face, I felt a nervous fluttering inside as the bandages were slowly unwound. When our eyes met, I saw John's face grinning with joy. "How is it, Catherine? Can you see your mother?"
"Yes, it's a bit bright, but I can see clearly."
"That's great. Finally, you can see." The first time I saw John smile, it felt more mocking than joyful about my restored sight. "Don't you remember anything when you look at me?" John inquired, as if testing me. Despite his words, I had no recognition or memory of John. Seeing my confusion and my head shake in denial, John let out a sigh and began telling the truth. "Catherine, actually, my name is Jack. Not John, but Jack."
"Jack?"
"I'm the ex-boyfriend you brutally dumped 2 years ago." Upon hearing this, I felt my blood run cold. Even though 2 years had passed, Jack looked so different that I couldn't recognize him at first glance. Neither did my mother. I was left in shock, my face pale and eyes wide.
"What's going on?"
"Don't you get it? You've married me. From now on, you'll be working as my wife." His words startled me, causing me to bolt out of the hospital room. However, Jack quickly caught up with me and dragged me back.
"This has to be a joke. If I knew it was you, I would never have married you. This is void."
"You signed the marriage papers, didn't you? There's no way this can be voided. Now, you'll pay for dumping me 2 years ago." Jack said with a smug expression, implying that breaking up with him was a sin. From what I heard, after our breakup, he'd been frantically searching for where I moved to. When he found out about my accident and subsequent hospitalization, he saw it as a golden opportunity. "When I heard you couldn't see, I thought it was divine punishment for neglecting me," he stated.
"That's nonsense,"
I retorted. "Is it? In the end, you're gonna marry me and serve me," he responded. Apparently, his offer to cover my hospital bills and other expenses was all for this twisted scheme. "After all I've done for you, you better serve me with all your heart," Jack sneered, looking at me with a devilish expression. Never did I think the one I trusted would betray me. Overwhelmed by regret, I bit my lip. "Like I said 2 years ago, you'll live with my folks. Make sure to handle the chores and work. I've spent money on you, so I expect some relaxation in return," he said. Jack shamelessly listed the unreasonable demands that had led to our breakup. The idea of now being financially obligated to him almost made me faint. After he said his piece and finally left the hospital room, my mother and I stood there, drained of strength. Even after I was discharged, the situation remained dire. Even if we paid back all the expenses using our savings, it seemed unlikely he'd let me go. How could we possibly get him to sign divorce papers? We racked our brains. "I'm sorry, Catherine, if only I'd been more thorough," my mother lamented. "It's not your fault, Mom. I didn't recognize him at first either." As my mother hunched over with guilt, I felt a surge of anger towards Jack and regret for my own naivety. Recalling Jack's words, the realization of his deep grudge sent chills down my spine.
For now, let's consult a lawyer or someone, huh?
Just when things seemed bleak, a phone call appeared to be a beacon of hope. It was from the police. Wondering what the police wanted at such a time, my mother and I exchanged puzzled glances before apprehensively answering.
Hello?
Is this Ms. Miller? We wanted to discuss the accident you were involved in some time ago. According to the police, they had found the car responsible for the accident that severely injured me. Shockingly, it was registered under Jack's name. As the officer relayed the information in a matter-of-fact tone, my mind went blank.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
What did they say? My mother inquired.
The car that hit me, it belonged to Jack.
What? As my mother and I discussed the situation, a simmering anger began to rise within me. If he had been searching for me since I rejected him 2 years ago, it wouldn't be surprising if he had found me even before my hospitalization. Could he have caused the accident? Such a suspicion arose, and if it was true, how audacious of him to think such a thing.
Could it be that he did all this out of spite for you rejecting him?
My mother pondered.
I've started to think the same. If that's the case, how selfish of him. I won't ever forgive him.
But wasn't there a lack of evidence? My mother questioned. Frowning at her words, I had to agree. There were hardly any eyewitnesses to the accident. It's a fact that Jack's car caused the accident, but it can't be proven that he was the one driving. He might even come up with a lame excuse that someone stole his car. Considering Jack's character, he's capable of pulling off such a ridiculous act. I said.
So, what are we gonna do?
If there's no evidence, then we just have to make him confess. Chances are, if cornered, he would prioritize self-preservation. No more beating around the bush, we couldn't let him continue this charade. Feeling that he might slip up now, I decided to strike back with a recorder in hand. Suggesting that we meet to discuss arrangements for our upcoming life together, Jack eagerly agreed, anticipating our conversation. Although I requested a one-on-one meeting at a diner, he smirked as he showed up with his mother. I held back my disgust at his excessive reliance on his mother, clutching the hidden recorder as I gave him a stern look. You didn't come by car today?
Why does it matter? Let's just get this over with. You need to understand the rules, okay?
He still believed I was clueless, laughing maliciously as he spoke. Barely suppressing the urge to confront him right then, I played along, making it easy for him to say whatever he wanted. Which rules are those? You've said so much that I can't keep track.
I got you. Given how forgetful you are, maybe I should write it all down for you.
He laughed mockingly, eagerly beginning to list the unreasonable conditions. His mother just nodded in agreement. Even though I was recording, I had to endure his absurd self-made rules, struggling to keep my composure.
My mom here will teach you how to be a proper wife. So be grateful and listen up.
As a wife, huh?
Don't even think of defying me. Remember, you owe me.
Time and again, he would bring up how he supported me by covering my hospital bills. Curious to see how he'd react, I asked if repaying those expenses would allow for a divorce. As expected, he scoffed at the idea. Why would I agree to that? Despite my busy schedule, I came to visit you in the hospital. If you're so set on divorce, repay me for all the favors I've done for you.
All the favors?
You mean visiting me? You fell for me all on your own and decided to marry me, remember? Even my mom said she'd forgive you for rejecting me once. So, you better serve me wholeheartedly from now on. No matter what I asked, Jack maintained his arrogant demeanor, convinced I had no options. His mother, too, seemed to think I was helpless, boasting about retraining me. Keeping my temper in check, I waited for the right moment to strike. Just to clarify, can you break down how much I owe you?
Sure. Let's start with the hospital bills. And don't forget the cost of the gifts I brought you, like cakes.
While calculating the expenses, Jack tried to inflate the amount, adding things like taxi fares for his hospital visits and the cost of gifts.
With such an amount, you'd probably take a lifetime to pay me back, huh?
Making sure he was well into his own delusion, and after he mentioned that absurd amount, I smirked and shot back. Well, only if it's a legitimate cost.
Of course, it's legit. I have every right to demand it from you.
In that case, I'll also exercise my right. Maybe we can add some compensation on top of that.
What?
He initially seemed confused about what I was implying. I showed him the call logs, informing him that the police had contacted me about the accident. The police have identified the car that hit me. They've contacted you too, haven't they?
What the hell are you talking about?
Playing dumb won't help. The reason you didn't come in your fancy car is that you couldn't, right? It finally dawned on him that I was on to the truth. Visibly flustered, Jack glanced towards his mother for support.
How do you know that?
With him practically confessing, I told him I had heard everything. Watching Jack panic, I felt assured of my upper hand.
Ha! Prove it. There's no evidence that I hit you.
Why are you so certain?
I made sure of everything before targeting you. My mom here kept an eye out too. I'm certain.
Jack confessed, indicating his mother was complicit. Glancing at the recorder discreetly under the table, I silently celebrated. Even if he was an ex-boyfriend, it was odd that someone at work would randomly spill about my hospitalization. He probably pretended to be a relative and gathered the information. His craftiness made me glare at him resentfully. Thinking there's no evidence? That's just wishful thinking on your part.
What are you talking about?
What if I recorded our entire conversation just now? I flaunted the recorder in front of him. Both turned pale, realizing their confession was caught on tape. I'd advise against doing anything rash. One call to the police and it's game over for you. Just moments ago, the two of them were so certain they could manipulate me as if I were some kind of maid. Now, they looked utterly defeated, their shoulders slumped in resignation. I had my doubts about how things would turn out, but thanks to their overconfidence and carelessness, they dug their own grave just as I had hoped. Seeing this, I finally felt relief.
You intentionally caused an accident and had the nerve to make such demands.
I'm sorry. Just don't report me to the police. So, you admit to everything?
Yes, I do. I was angry you rejected me and thought I could bind you by owing me a favor. My mom said it was a good idea.
Jack's overly attached behavior to his mother gave me the chills. But what felt even more unsettling was the silent presence of his mother-in-law sitting next to him. It's one thing for her to agree, but to learn that she actively encouraged her son to intentionally cause the accident is no laughing matter. The marriage is null and void. Sign the divorce papers properly. Fine. Since you caused the accident, it's only right for you to pay both the compensation and the medical bills. We'll discuss this further through lawyers later on.
But why should I pay all of it? Half of the medical expenses should be on you. There's absolutely no reason for me to forgive someone who intentionally caused an accident.
I coldly responded, and Jack, at a loss for words, fell silent. As I got up to leave, I could hear him arguing with his mother behind me, but I chose to ignore it and walked out of the diner. Hello, Mom? Yeah, I'm heading to the police station now. I tightly gripped the confession, ready to report the incident to the police. I'm determined to make sure Jack faces the consequences of his actions. Later, thanks to his own confession, things settled down much smoother than I anticipated. Jack, who always seemed to buckle under authority, couldn't argue much when lawyers were involved, and I managed to get almost all of the compensation I asked for.
I promise I'll pay everything. Just please don't get the police involved.
Sorry, but that's not happening. You need to face the consequences of your actions. It seems Jack wanted things to be settled without making a big fuss, but it's not up to me anymore. Fearing the discovery of the accident he caused, he didn't even send his car for repairs, instead opting to hide the evidence. This dubious act led the police to investigate his home. He refused to cooperate with voluntary questioning, dragging the matter on, and consequently, the neighborhood quickly became rife with rumors. In the end, blaming me for making things uncomfortable for him, Jack muttered some parting words and moved out. It's like the saying the thief has a guilty conscience. Both my mother and I couldn't help but be in disbelief. I just hope wherever Jack has moved to, he doesn't bring any more pain to other women. Sometime later, with the compensation money I received, I decided to move again. Knowing that my ex-boyfriend was aware of my workplace, I chose not to return and started afresh in a new location. Luckily, my new job environment is much more supportive, and I've been having a good time. Having a stain on my past does upset me, but I chose not to dwell on it, seeing it saddens my mother. Thank you for your help the other day, Catherine. Would you like to grab a meal sometime as thanks?
That sounds great. Any good restaurant recommendations?
Currently, there's a male colleague who's been quite friendly and doesn't concern himself with my past. Given the trust issues my past experience instilled in me, this time around, I intend to be more discerning and am hopeful to find happiness.